Today, I am going to discuss the relationship between shareholders and managers. Specifically, this lecture focuses on agency theory and the relationship between shareholders, who are the owners of the firm, and their agents, that is, the managers of the firm. The lecture coincides with the PowerPoint presentation, and I hope it is easy to follow. I will note the appropriate page in the PowerPoint presentation. So let's move on to slide 2 in the PowerPoint presentation. The learning objectives for this class are to gain an understanding of the agency relationship and the problem associated with this relationship. I will discuss 3 internal governance mechanisms that are used to monitor management's behavior, limiting their making decisions that benefit their own interests and not that of shareholders. I will also discuss 3 ethics models which guide business decisions. Previously, we discussed that in organizations, there are shareholders and managers. The shareholders who own the firm are known as the principal in the agency relationship. The managers who are charged with managing the firm are known as agents. The principal hires agents to act on their behalf, creating the principal agent relationship. Moving on to slide 3 in the PowerPoint presentation. So, what do managers do in the interest of shareholders? A manager's main function is to create value in the organization. Managers go about carrying out this responsibility by accomplishing various subtasks. For one, managers set the goals for the organization. For example, it is typically managers and not shareholders who decide if the organization's goal is to grow profits by 5% or set a goal to have 20% of sales come from international markets, or have an objective of growth from the development of new products and thus grow organically versus through acquisitions. In addition, managers also attempt to create value for the organization by how they allocate the firm's resources. For example, should the firm spend their financial resources on research and development? Should they spend funds for manufacturing operations or possibly acquisitions? What about human resources? Should they use financial resources for profit sharing, pay for performance? These are the type of decisions that determine how much value is created in the organization. Another subtask of managers is to use their authority to determine what their subordinates will do. That is, they are responsible for determining the roles of the employees under them. Managers also determine how employees that report to them will carry out their work. Another subtask is for managers to monitor their subordinates' behavior to make sure they are performing their responsibilities and to also hold these employees accountable for the amount and quality of their work. Question: where do managers get the authority to take on these responsibilities in the organization? They are given the authority from the owners, that is, the shareholders. Moving on to slide 4, which shows an illustration of the agency relationship. When the principal hires the agent, this creates the agency relationship. The relationship is similar when a homeowner hires a contractor or a management team hires a consultant. Agency theory argues that this relationship creates risk for the principal, that is, the shareholders. So, what is the risk? Whenever you hire someone and give them authority to make decisions on your behalf, you bear the risk of whether or not that person will make decisions and perform their task in your best interest or in their self interest. This creates the agency problem. Moving to slide 5. When shareholders delegate authority to managers and are not there to monitor managers' decisions, it becomes difficult to hold the managers accountable. Bad performance in a firm and the loss of shareholder value may not be due to managers not acting in the best interest of the shareholder. These decisions could be due to something else. In any case, it is hard to determine if managers are to be held accountable. This leads to the agency problem. The agency problem occurs because you have the expert manager or agent that has more information than the principal. We would say there is information asymmetry between the two parties, with the agent having more information about their actions and the effect of those actions. Information asymmetry is risky for the principal because the agent may use their access to more information and make decisions that promote their self interest or take risks, knowing such risk does not have an impact on their well being, but possibly on the well being of the shareholders. If the manager is acting in her best interest, this is called managerial opportunism. Specifically, managers take advantage of their situation and the information asymmetry and make decisions for their own benefit. The agent is acting in their own self interest without consideration of the interest of the principal. Examples of managerial opportunism are insider trading and misrepresentation of how a firm reports accounting information. Information asymmetry and managerial opportunism can also lead to moral hazard, which is a situation where the agent will get involved in risky endeavors knowing that he or she is protected against the risk or loss and that other parties, possibly the principal, will bear the cost. The financial crisis and undertaking risky loans is an example of information asymmetry that led to moral hazard. And if managers who made those decisions did so for their own benefit, then we can also say this was an example of managerial opportunism. Sometimes what appears to be moral hazard may actually be managerial hubris. This is when there is excessive confidence or arrogance that leads a manager to believe he is right and will not make a wrong decision. Thus, instead of taking on risks because of being insulated, a manager may take on risks due to hubris, believing that he can do no wrong. Let's move on to slide 6. Principals recognize that there will be information asymmetry in the principal-agent relationship and that there are opportunities for decisions to be influenced by moral hazard, managerial opportunism, and hubris. In order to address these potential problems, principals install governance mechanisms. There are 3 forms of governance mechanisms that we will discuss in class. One is the board of directors, another is executive compensation, and finally, we will discuss ownership concentration. These 3 are internal governance mechanisms used to monitor top managers' activities and align their decisions with the interests of the shareholders. Before going into detail behind the board of director, let's discuss compensation and ownership concentration. Executive compensation is a mechanism to control agents' behavior, usually taking the form of stock-based compensation or promotion and career paths that are based upon meeting some performance objectives consistent with the principal's interests. In class, I want you to be prepared to discuss some specifics of how you would design a compensation package to meet specific shareholder goals, such as market growth or cost reductions or innovation. Ownership concentration is another mechanism used to monitor agents' behaviors. When a large amount of the ownership of a firm is concentrated in one entity, this gives that entity more power that can be used to influence decisions. For example, as an individual, my owning less than 1% of the outstanding shares of a company gives me little influence. However, large institutional investors, like pension funds that may own 10 to 15%, can use their large concentration of ownership to influence the decisions that management will make. Let's move on to slide 7. Top management hierarchy involves ownership, trusteeship, that is, those who are entrusted and have fiduciary duties to the owners. There is also corporate management and lower level management. Moving to slide 8, where we discuss the trusteeship. That is, the board of directors, chair of the board, and the executive and salary committees. The board of directors is responsible for monitoring what managers do and questioning their decision making. These individuals are either elected or selected to their position on the board. The chair of the board has the most authority in the organization and is the principal representative for the shareholders. Because of the importance of this position in protecting shareholders' interests, more firms are separating this responsibility from the CEO and having different people assume these roles. The executive committee is comprised of high ranking directors and managers. Their role is to monitor and evaluate the decisions that corporate managers make concerning the resources of the firm. Next, we have the salary committee. This committee determines how best to structure the compensation package for corporate managers in order to meet the interests of shareholders. Moving on to slide 9, where I will discuss more details behind the board of directors. Board of directors can be categorized as inside directors and outside directors. Inside directors are employees of the firm that have positions and roles in the firm. A benefit to having inside directors that have positions in the firm is their understanding of how the organization's operations run. They have access to information that can be useful in making decisions concerning how to best use the company's resources to meet shareholders' goals. However, access to this information does cause information asymmetry between the inside directors and shareholders, which, as we discussed earlier, may lead to making decisions opportunistically. Outside directors are not employees of the firm. They are typically CEOs or high ranking officials from similar industries or former government officials. The benefit to outside directors is they are likely to be more objective, considering they do not have ties that are as close as employees of the firm. Unfortunately, because they are not as aware of the firm's day-to-day operations, outside directors are prone to be more passive in their role as guardians of shareholders' interests. Moving on to slide 10 and ethics. Ethical guidelines are not typically considered a governance mechanism, but it warrants discussing because these guidelines can be useful in affecting the manager's, that is, agent's, decisions. There are 3 ethical models with which you should become familiar. It is important for you to understand managers' decisions will differ depending upon which ethics model they adhere to. Would we need governance mechanisms if managers were ethical? Before addressing that question, it is important to note that ethics change over time and that ethics are relative between individuals, organizations, industries, countries, and regions of the world. That is to say, individuals, organizations, industries, etc., will differ in what is considered ethical. For example, most countries rely on relationships that can be used for financial gain. However, based upon the ethical norms in the country, how to use these relationships will differ. It is also important to note that ethics are not the same as laws. Unfortunately, managers sometimes make decisions based upon legal requirements without consideration of ethics. A classic example of legal but likely unethical behavior is the case of the board of directors for WorldCom and their CEO, Bernie Ebbers. Mr. Ebbers was given huge stock options and a personal loan valued over $150 million. The directors, in exchange, were allowed to use the company's jet for discounted prices in addition to other perks. At the time, these behaviors were not illegal. However, most considered these to be unethical, and shareholders would likely have not agreed to the arrangement. A lot of regulatory laws are typically established after the fact to close loopholes that permit unethical behavior. In the case of Mr. Ebbers, he ultimately was convicted of fraud and sentenced to 20 years in jail. Moving on to slide 11. These are the three ethics models that we will discuss. We have the utilitarian ethical model, governed by the principle that decisions should be made based upon producing the greatest good for the greatest number of people. This involves calculating the number of people to be positively affected. For example, should managers make the decision that their firm will charge customers in all countries the same price for a drug, or decide to base the price on customers' ability to pay and therefore treat more people? Using the utilitarian model would likely lead to a decision to charge different prices. However, the justice model would likely lead to a decision that notes in fairness and impartiality charge the same price. For moral rights, it is important to protect the people affected by the decision. But here you do have to judge who you are protecting. Can you protect one group of people without hurting another? Then who should be protected and who should be hurt? We will discuss more of these ethics models in class. So let's move on to slide 12. Please answer these questions prior to class and be prepared to discuss in lecture. How would you design stock-based compensation to influence managers' decisions, such that they pursue innovation in a firm? How about designing a compensation package that focuses on long-term profitability instead of short-term? I want you to consider each ethics model and be prepared to discuss the implications and problems that managers may encounter due to each. How do you think ownership concentration influences managers' decisions? Have you encountered legal but not ethical decisions in your work experience? What do you think are the sources of organizational ethics? How can you influence ethical behavior in an organization? And last, why does unethical behavior occur?